Everyone, we have a very special guest today. We're going to be tugging on my heartstrings, talking about data analytics and data sciences. We have Dr. Kruti Lehenbauer. Thank you so much for being here. I am stoked to talk to you about data sciences, data analytics, statistics, math, and of course, AI. Before I start nerding out, please tell us about yourself.
Well, I love the fact that you said before you start nerding out, because if I had to define myself, I would say I'm a nerd and geek all rolled into one who just loves statistics and data and math and basically anything that makes me think about things differently. So I've spent my whole life basically honing these skills. I was in academia for 20 years. And then I just, was doing consulting on the side. And then last year I decided, you know what, maybe I should do this full-time consulting thing and just, take my awesomeness out of the classroom into the world. So here I am.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, let's get right into it. AI, it's a buzzword at this point, or buzzwords at this point, but I feel like many people aren't necessarily familiar with what makes AI, right?
Mhm.
What is artificial intelligence and what are the pieces that actually create it, right? So let's get right to the point. How important is data sciences and data analytics and all the different algorithms and the logic that's used in the development of AI?
Well, artificial intelligence or intelligence in general means the ability of any object or person or individual to respond to a set of queries using their own experiences,
Oof, so nicely put.
right? So the artificiality of it comes in because instead of an individual or a person, it's a machine.
Mhm.
But how does a machine collect its experiences? Well, that depends on what you feed it, right? So the data that goes in to training something to be able to respond using that data matters.
Mhm.
Data science, data analysis, data analytics, the purpose of all of this is to make sure that what we are feeding into our little artificial intelligence machine is making sense. Now, if an AI system is trained on really bad data, it's going to give really bad output. So put junk in, you get junk out, basically.
Mhm.
And I think I've seen a few posts and a few things which do talk about the fact that since the early AI was trained on certain publicly available information, which had all kinds of non-inclusive biases in
Yes,
that information, that the initial output from these AI generated responses was continuing those biases heavily.
absolutely.
And so that's where it matters. What are you putting in? Is it clean? Is it relevant? If you're like, I don't know if you've heard about that whole Gemini responding,
Of
with blue
course.
and pizza, right? Like
Yep.
that shouldn't have gone in the first place
Rep.
because it
Yep.
was an irrelevant piece of information.
Mhm.
And I think that higher quality AI combats this disinformation with the help of human intelligence. Somebody's got to
Absolutely.
see it and make sure, dude, why is glue put in with pizza sauce? That doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. You hit on a really important point here. I remember in the earlier days, when I say earlier days, less than 2 years ago at this point, but that's a lifetime in AI. But when I first especially started training images and pictures and of people in general, right? Let's say somebody like me, or somebody a minority. I had a hard time actually getting the AI to spit out my likeness because the base fundamental of what the AI knows, in this case, in image generator and image diffuser, couldn't quite understand that my skin tone and my features aren't what you would typically see in Google Images or something like that, right? So I remember having a hard time feeding data into this thing so I could finally get a good image of myself. And of course, like you said, as time went on, it got better.
Mhm.
It got a lot better. But like you said, garbage in, garbage out, right? So on that topic, let's talk a little bit about the differences between how a human knows what's right and wrong and how a machine knows what's right and wrong, right? So it's an odd comparison, but I feel like so many people think that a machine can take over human thinking, which anybody in this space will literally just laugh when they hear that. But can we talk a little bit about the differences in how do you teach a machine versus how do you teach a human?
Now, it kind of goes into a little bit of something that sci-fi has actually addressed on multiple occasions.
I love it.
So I'm going to quote Star Trek.
Please do.
So starting, but basically, one of the things that has often been brought up in the context of this, because, scientific fiction and AI as a concept has been around for decades.
Sure.
So the question is, what separates humans from others? Now, that's the general question. And one of the things they say is that a human being is capable of not always making the rational choice. And that means that there are gray zones. Everything is not just binary. There's all these shades between white and black that a human being can traverse because of the way our brains work, because of the way we have learned to see that in our life as well. You know, you meet all kinds of people. You know that there are differences. When we are training artificial intelligence models, whoever's entering things in, and I'm not, doing it at a small data level, it's like you have to put in a range. Like, oh, this can take a value between 0 and 1. But where does that range fall? Or what are the probabilities? Those need to be manually entered. If those probabilities are wrongly entered, they are always going to result in insufficient information available to the machine or the artificial intelligence, and it just guesses an answer. In the case of most human beings, there is a tendency to avoid guessing. Most of us, when faced with something that we don't know, tend to, instead of going towards hallucination, tend to be like, I have no idea.
I don't know. Yeah. Let me find out.
Right. Exactly. Let me look somewhere else. Until we reach a point where the artificial intelligence learns how to go check something for validity. And I know there are people working on models like this to mitigate these risks. I don't think that there's ever going to be a full replacement even possible. I think that people confuse intelligence with test taking. And I hear this, and I bring it up because I hear this all the time. An AI bot can ace this exam, even though only 30% of the human beings pass it. Well, because if that tells you more about the quality of the exam than the quality of the AI.
Thank you. Please keep going.
So it's like you're testing how well you can regurgitate nonsense versus checking to see what value that human being is bringing to the field. So yes, of course, an AI can probably ace that exam because it has access, unlimited access to infinite amounts of information, which a human being physically cannot do. But in terms of the ability of the mind to think through and critically solve a problem, the AI is kind of stuck at a 5-year-old stage. It only knows what it knows. I mean, you and I, before this, we were talking about our kids, and it's that feeling of, oh, I know everything comes from the fact that they've been exposed to very limited things.
Exactly.
And while we can tell our kids to shut up, we don't necessarily want to do that to ChatGPT and get thrown out for being badly behaved.
Right. And I think you touched up on something really, really nice here, if I may paraphrase. Artificial intelligence, whether it's GPT, anything, any artificial intelligence, is literally trained on a finite scope of something, right? Well, even if you take a human being, shut everything else out in the world, in that human being's brain, and train that human being in that finite scope, that human being will be fantastic at that too, right? And I feel like that's what most people miss with AI in general, is that, no, you don't get it. This is a machine. You have to train it in that scope from A to B, black to white, right? And that's all it's going to know. So that's why I kind of go nuts sometimes going, this thing is smarter than Einstein. I'm like, well, really? How are you measuring smart, right?
There you go. Is it an ability to, because if there was a way that we could put all that information in the brain of somebody and create something that can help them break it down immediately, I mean, they would probably be geniuses too in the modern,
in the quote unquote sense,
but they may not be able to use that information meaningfully because all their facilities, all the human memory is being choked up with useless information or unrelated information.
Right.
And I sorry to interrupt, but you said something that I want to kind of just take a second to talk about.
Sure.
If a human being were to devote themselves to just one field and one thing, and they did it amazingly well. You mentioned Einstein. There are a lot of physicists who things have been abused socially because they tend to go into this mindset of investigating what they love to do. And as a data scientist, and as a data scientist, I get that flack too. Like, it irks me when people are like, data scientists are really not very socially smart. It's like,
well,
no, but that's because how are you defining socially smart?
Exactly.
I mean, when I talk with another data scientist, I might be the most, vocal, outstanding person, but you put me in a group of artists and suddenly I'm like, what are you talking about? Like my husband's an artist. Like literally, he does oil paintings. That's his job. And we always surprise each other, like, how are we together? Like, we're complete. But the point is that the expectation that is unusual, that it falls outside that normal range. But on the other hand, with machines, we don't realize that we are just training them on little bits and pieces. And we don't call them dorks and geeks and pick on them.
Yeah. Expectations. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. There's so many different tangents I can go into this with respect to expectations, and I feel like psychologically,
Mhm.
as humans, whenever AI is mentioned, or artificial intelligence, or machine learning, whatever is mentioned, expectations all of a sudden switch, right? So, for example, let's go back to the art world for a second,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
An image, let's say a realistic image that's been generated by AI,
Mhm.
right? There have been loads of times where I would, let's say, show a picture of myself,
Mhm.
and somebody would go, "Oh, nice, it's a picture of you," and I go, "Well, this is actually AI." And the moment I say it's AI, someone will go, "Oh, I knew something was wrong because blah 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 blah." I'm like, well, you didn't mention that
Mhm.
20 seconds ago, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, and I feel like we're a little bit all over the place with what do we expect from AI,
Mhm.
right? What is the threshold of this thing is amazing versus this thing is just spitting out regurgitating information, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
feel like most people still haven't quite caught up to that quote unquote expectation, right? Of what this thing
Absolutely.
can and cannot do and what it is and what it is not,
And
right?
also want to add to it what we want it to do versus what we don't want it to
What we
do,
don't want it to do.
right? Like one of the things that I keep, and of course, there's no easy solution to this, but it's like if AI could solve the biggest problem in my life, it would be that it would just figure out a way to pick up all the laundry from everywhere in the house and do it and hang it back up,
Mhm.
right? Like for me, that AI would make a huge difference in my
Yeah.
life. Chat GPT or Copilot or whatever, they help, but what would I really be willing to pay for is my laundry.
Mhm.
So I'm simply saying that expectations also vary from person to person.
Sure.
And I think the problem is we all have different expectations of what our lowest task is, like what we hate doing. And we
Mhm.
want that to be automated. I mean, that's why we have dishwashers and washing machines and all of that. But I think that because we all have different expectations and we are expecting that AI will solve all of them,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. One
Yeah.
tool can't fix it all.
Right.
So,
Well, we were talking about Star Trek a little bit earlier, and since we're talking about AI, Lieutenant Commander Data, let's say, right? This android that comes the closest of being a human. And then, for all you Star Trek fans out there, there are plenty of episodes where they'll literally pop his head open and look at his quote
neural
unquote brain
network.
and then his neural network exactly, right? And then you find out he's this incredibly complicated machine that's taking input from everywhere,
Yeah.
right? So obviously today, that input means GPU
Mhm.
and energy and the vast amount of money that's spent on actually keeping these GPUs up. Yesterday, I was actually coding a language model that's
Mhm.
running Meta,
Mhm.
excuse me, that's running Llama, right? And
Llama. Yeah.
I wanted the 70 billion parameter one, and I had to go get an 80 gigabyte GPU, right? That's like $2 an hour.
Yes.
And I'm going, man, just for this thing,
Yeah.
I have to spin up this many resources,
Mhm.
right? Do you think it's ever possible to non-organically create something like Lieutenant Commander Data, where all this input is coming in and it's in this nice compact head? That's taking it all in.
What's funny is that that has been a question that a lot of sci-fi and Trekkies especially have been asking. And actually, it was also a huge part of Star Trek series itself. And I think if you watch the latest Picard one, that's where, that's kind of where they went like, oh, they can create a whole race of these people, like,
Mhm.
data-like creatures, but not quite like data. And one of the things had to do with mechanical versus emotional aspects of an android.
Mhm.
Now, I know it kind of goes above and beyond what we're talking, but I think it is technically possible. But I think also that just the fact that there's no way we can input a soul.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to say that, but
No, 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 don't. Please don't. Yeah.
it's the mechanical part of what I am. Like mechanically speaking, I am a teacher, I am a daughter, I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a sister. But how I play all of those roles has to do with my emotional experiences regarding being a teacher, being a mother, being a wife, being a sister, whatever those experiences are shaping what I do. And I think that learning that emotional differential, right? Like, how do I learn that this is the wrong thing to tell my kid? Because the first time I said it, I probably hurt them. Do I have the ability to see, okay, that was not nice
Mhm.
and improve upon it? Or as if I'm only doing it mechanically, I'll just keep doing it again and again and again.
Mhm.
I don't know if we are ever going to get to a point where artificial intelligence can also have an emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And so I love data, and not just data, but like Lieutenant data,
Lieutenant Commander, yeah.
Lieutenant Commander data. But I don't think we'll see it in any foreseeable future.
It's very difficult. I mean, we had Ben Earl in the studio last week, and he's an artist, and
Yeah.
he had mentioned, passion
Mhm.
is suffering,
Yeah.
and and nothing artificial that doesn't have a mind body soul connection
Mhm.
can ever quite experience that, right? So that in itself, right there, anything artificial is going to fall short,
Yeah.
right? It's just not possible. It can get close, but it won't get there,
Please. Yeah.
right? Well, based on that, since we're talking about data and the human machine connection, right? Something that I've always felt is people tend to get scared with the building blocks of artificial intelligence, like we talked about, is data science, data analytics, building blocks of which is math and statistics, right? And I've long argued that everybody should know, especially if you're a marketer, and especially if you're a marketer in tech, should know some statistics,
Yeah.
like hypothesis testing. Did my campaign work or did it not? You know,
Yeah.
just a small
Simple.
question,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Can we get it from an expert consultant who's in data scientist? How important is it to know just that base level of statistics, so that we can understand this new revolution happening at the moment, as well as just make us better at our day-to-day jobs in this ever technologically increasing society?
I'm so happy you asked this question. So I don't know if you've seen them or not, or at least the viewers. I've been doing what is called post-it
I
statistics.
love those things. Yes.
And the reason is that after all these years in the business world, I see some brilliant, brilliant people in different fields. And because we live in a world which requires you to be data driven, they all think they're data driven because they are using metrics. But then when I dig a little bit deeper under the surface, I go, you don't understand what metrics
Mhm.
you might be using, or you're relying on the metrics that are provided to you by either a team or some website
Right.
or some tool. But at your core, you don't know what this can do for
Yeah.
you, for your business. And that was the motivation behind starting Post-it Statistics is,
Mhm.
okay, maybe if I put it on a Post-it every day, you'll pay attention and
Mhm.
you'll learn one thing. It takes 30 seconds to look at that Post-it, but maybe you'll learn one thing that
Mhm.
you've not considered before.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
hypothesis testing, normal distribution, all of these things are used all the time by the data teams in businesses. But there's a translation issue, and you're absolutely right. It comes from the fear of math and statistics. And as a teacher, one of the things I learned early on is usually when someone's afraid of numbers, it's because, and I always ask that to people like, who hurt you? Because the root is that somebody, some teacher, some adult, somewhere along your life cycle told you that you sucked at math.
Huh. Okay.
Or that you didn't do it right, that you always keep getting things wrong. When you hear those words, the human response is to shut down.
Mm.
Unfortunately, with data, stats, math, all of that, if you shut down on one concept, you never quite pick up the concept that builds on it.
Mm.
And so that fear becomes bigger as time goes on. And so that's the big reason why I try to break it down. I'm like, okay, I know you're scared of formulas. Just look at these three things. Just think about
Mhm.
it, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe I try to put examples in there simply because it's like, here's how hypothesis testing can help your
Yeah.
business. Or,
Yes.
find the right person who can help you with this metric at this time in this manner, because you need to know that this matters, basically, right? Like, oh, you want to measure your growth. Find out, what are you measuring? Are you
Yeah.
using useless variables? Because not everything is growth. Not everything contributes to growth, and I love the fact that thanks to the AI and digital transformation, ironically, most businesses have had to become more conscious about their teams and their people.
Hmm.
Because without the buy-in from their teams and their people, they literally can't grow. You can't force someone to learn how to use Copilot unless you explain to them why you want them to learn. So I don't know if it was all over the place or not,
Not
but
at all. Not at all. I'd like to keep pulling on that string actually. I 100% agree with you that people need a reason to do this. And I found that in my professional experience and as a data analyst, data scientist working with especially marketers, something as small as a standard deviation, right? I am sure that this campaign worked, or this thing will boost your engagement by, let's say, 30%,
Mhm.
standard deviation of 5%,
Right.
right? And of course, then we typically go into, okay, what's the standard deviation, right? Okay, well, it could be 35%, it could be 25%, right? But even just that small thing will allow you to go, hey, okay, I've got somewhere between 25 to 35% chance here that I'm gonna see a boost or my gain. Yeah, exactly. Do I want to take that risk? Okay. So is the risk worth the end result? That in itself is a fantastic business conversation, right? The whole everything just changed.
Yeah.
I guess my question to you is, how do we communicate that? How do we A, make people less afraid of math, and B, actively show, no, like you should know this thing. You don't have to be a full-blown statistician, but you should know a little bit about this thing. How do we communicate that? How do we break that psychological barrier?
I have learned that one of the best ways to do this is to avoid using the technical term.
Oh, okay.
So instead of calling it standard deviation, I would call it fluctuation.
All right.
Or uncertainty.
I like that. Uncertainty. Certainty of 5%.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm 95% confident that you can get a result. And then you say something like, look, I'm saying 95% because it's a technical term, but in reality, I'm almost certain that 19 out of 20 times we're going to hit this. Now suddenly it changes the conversation because 19 out of 20 is a lot easier for people to digest than 95%.
Instead of saying alpha of 5% with a p-score of 0.23.
Yes, like 1.96 p, really, I mean the z-score. But it changes the conversation. If you've noticed, some of the better marketers have already used this. You don't even pick up on it, but if you look at some of the ads, one of the most memorable ones, again, I'm not naming the name of the company, but it's like 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this brand. Now, the irony is, from a math standpoint, they just gave you a bullshit number.
They just gave you a number. Wait, who are these 5? Who's your population here? But yes.
Right? So, and it doesn't talk about why is the 5th dentist, even if you just take the 5, why are they saying no? Are they saying
perception bias? Yeah.
Are they saying no to gum itself, or are they saying no to this specific gum? But it doesn't matter because everybody's thinking 4 out of 5. The irony is, if I told you that we need to do an elective surgery on you, and there is a 1 in 5 chance that you can die from it, you will choose not to do it. But when it comes to gum, 1 in 5 chance of getting a dentist disapproval, who cares? So things matter based on what you're measuring.
That's perfect. That's a perfect way to also tie in to what we were just talking about. Okay, the 1 out of 5, you might end up on the operating table, right? But that means there's a 4 out of 5, you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
4 out of 5, dentists recommend this gum, but there's a 1 out of 5 going, you should not be touching this gum, right? So it's because the weights of the outcomes are different, that 20% outweighs that 80%, right? Now, do you think this is a uniquely human perception of how to make that decision?
Yes.
Given the situation? Or do you think a machine can weigh that as well? Well, one of them we're talking about life, one of them we're talking about gum, right?
I don't think we are there yet.
Okay.
Now, if we had Lieutenant Commander Data, he might be able to make that decision, but we are nowhere near that yet.
Okay.
We could train the model to identify life-threatening situations when considering risk and uncertainty, but there is no guarantee that it would necessarily pick up on it. I'll give you a very simple example, and kind of ties back to something you said earlier. When you first started playing with ChatGPT and other LLMs creating images, and it was difficult to get a likeness because it was trained on a very different set of model. I had the same problem. Data science, I said, draw me an image of a data scientist. I pulled out 100 images, and there were 2 that were female. That's probably because the data that it was trained on at that time, there's still fewer women in data than I would like, but at least it's balancing out. But the presumption of I need to create an image of a data scientist always defaulting to male, I had a problem with it. I mean, I didn't do anything about it, but I was just like, damn it. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that ability to discern, or that ability to be like, oh, this was a life and death situation versus just, okay, I misunderstood the gender. I don't know if it can get it. I really don't. Because what if instead of gum, you put medicine? Now suddenly it's not, but it could still be life-threatening if you took the medicine when it was not recommended for you. I mean, that's why we have all these disclaimers, right, on every medical ad, which, by the way, is a very uniquely American phenomenon.
Yes, it is.
I've never seen ads for medicines, especially prescription drugs, in any other country of the world that I've traveled to. Maybe I'm wrong, but Why are you asking me to ask my doctor if I need a medicine or not? Like, what?
That it's talking into a
I know.
whole different conversation. Pulling back a little bit on the data side of things.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, going back, what do you think organizations can do to make sure that that key people especially, are data savvy?
I think that organizations, as a part of their professional development, should offer what I like to call statistical literacy trainings.
Mhm.
In today's day and age, it is critical for decision makers, managers, users, and actual operators of making, of doing things to be able to translate some of these data terms more comfortably. They don't need to know how to manually solve a problem using z-scores or anything, but they need to know where that number is coming from.
Mhm.
That, okay, I'll just give you a simple example. You said earlier about the mean and standard deviation, right? Like, so you have the mean and you have the standard deviation, and you said you can build a 95% confidence interval that's based on two standard deviations on either side. But one standard deviation on either side is what we consider normal fluctuation. 2/3 of your data falls in that one standard deviation. And even though it's such a simple thing, because that's a pure majority, if you think about it, but most of us don't realize it.
Mhm.
And so when you say, oh, our normal expectation is this, well, that normalcy itself comes with fluctuation. Now, when we see someone's behavior, we can identify because our brains are smarter than us, like as crazy as that sounds.
No, I absolutely agree with you.
But our brains can tell the difference between, okay, that is normal behavior versus that is not normal behavior much more easily than if we had to quantify it. So I say take a step back, look at it the other way around. Instead of always quantifying something, can you understand what it means? And if you
Internalize it.
Yes, internalize it, understand that concept, and you're likely to make better decisions because if nothing else, you will know what questions to ask.
Mhm.
Like, oh, you just gave me this range, Beck. Are you talking about the confidence interval? That's all. They don't need to know how to calculate it, but knowing that that's a confidence interval, it would make the world of a difference in terms of improving communications between data teams and non-data teams on both ends, because now they're speaking each other's language.
They're speaking each other's language.
We
Exactly.
need that translation bridge.
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. Do you think AI can help that somehow? Do you think there's a way now that we have these GPT models or just vast amounts of uh, data, no pun intended here, that we can just go search? How do you see I guess, in a way, disrupting the space or making it easier for people to understand what's happening?
Well, websites have been trying to do that for years.
Hmm.
Most of those are human driven, right? Like there is a blog here, blog there, where you can, like if you go on Google and look for explain standard deviation to me, you'll have hundreds of thousands of websites, videos, everything pop up to cater to your need. GPT allows you, or Gemini will allow you to get exactly what you need. And okay, check these top three resources that we found out, right? So it does make it easier, I guess, narrower. The search is narrower rather than being all over the place. I don't know if it is better. And I'll explain why. I've checked the models and they will pick the highest rated
They will.
stuff. Highest rated stuff depends on so many different algorithms across different platforms, I could be rated high simply because I have some bot farm who's liking all of my stuff. Or I could be rated higher just because I'm actually an expert at something, but that's less likely to happen. And I see this in LinkedIn, where they have those AI written contribution articles. And over and over again, I see that they try to explain a concept, but then you look at least some of the human beings who are not just copying and pasting, but the ones that are actually writing their own authentic answers make a lot more sense than the AI generated answer. So what I like is that the AI knows what to expect in terms of the question, but it's not quite there yet in terms of what to answer. I don't know if that helps.
I understand 100% what you're saying.
Okay.
Let me say, do you think something like this would help if someone were to take on a fun side project, right? So for example, this is a bit more of an extreme example because it's me. I built, I don't know if I should be saying this on camera, but I built a skin cancer detecting program using Python, right?
Awesome.
Again, I'm not sure if I should be saying this on camera.
You can remove it later.
And I got it within 70% certainty,
Okay.
right? That this thing will do well.
Okay.
Now, while doing it, of course, and the images I got are all open source images
Right.
from several different clinics, right? Now, as I'm building this thing and as I'm building image classification models and or packages and using them, right? I naturally started asking more questions. Okay, why is this only at 70%? How can I get it to 90%? What's missing? How can I reinforce this? So on and so forth, right? But because I asked these questions and because I was interested, now I'm forced to learn about concepts maybe I wouldn't have known before, right?
Right.
Now we're going beyond that bell curve. Now we're talking about overfitting, underfitting, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Well, eventually it got to a point where I found out this data set or this model can never get beyond 70% because the data set I have did not have enough examples of malignant moles, right?
Right.
Therefore, I probably shouldn't publish this thing, right?
Mhm.
But I got to that resolution iteratively by
Right.
asking questions, by going, okay, why isn't this thing getting any better?
Right.
This is a bit more of an extreme example, but I wonder if we can have people take on just some fun projects like that with the intent that I'm going to learn statistics as I do this.
I think it would be very valuable. But here's what I've found. You cannot teach statistics while you're teaching how to solve an actual problem. And the reason is it's a human distraction issue. If I'm focused on it's the same problem why multitasking, even though people claim it's amazing, never works. You either end up half-assing one or both things simultaneously. So if you're trying to solve a problem and learn a new concept simultaneously, you'll screw them both up. It has to go in a stepwise order. In your case, you figured out the problem, you did your iterations, and then you figured out why your problem wasn't solving things exactly how you needed it, right? I'm keeping it deliberately vague because but if we are trying to teach statistics or the concept of statistics on an actual real life problem at the same time, there's too much going on because your brain's trying to solve the problem. You've already asked the question to your brain and it's going to try to solve that problem. And then on the other hand, you're trying to learn something new. And your brain's going, wait, I can't do these things together. So something is going to give.
Not enough GPU.
Yes, exactly. Not enough energy. So the way to do this would be to learn the concept with a with a problem that you're interested in, but you're not directly facing right away. Because then you are focused on learning how to solve or the steps, and then learning to apply them on your own. Solving the problem while trying to learn the concept means, like I said, you're just all over the place. And you're so close to the problem usually that your solution is going to be biased.
Interesting. So your solution is going to be biased because again, you have an inherent need to solve that one problem. I never thought of it that way.
That's one of the reasons why hiring experts helps.
Okay.
Because otherwise you're always going to try to put a Band-Aid on something just so that you can move on if you don't understand it.
I see. Well, in that case, now I'm learning something. I should be asking this to myself. In that case, what can people do to self-motivate and basically expect and force themselves to learn this material? You mentioned maybe you hire an expert, maybe you hire a consultant. What can people do to make themselves better?
One of the things that I haven't done it in a long time, and I've done it for universities and groups of students, but I haven't done myself, but I'm just throwing it out there, would be to hire somebody who can come in, say there's a marketing team, right? And what are the specific statistics that can help the marketing team, whether they're facing a problem or not? It is called being prepared. You bring in an expert as a part of the professional and career development of your marketing team. It takes 2 to 3 hours. Doesn't have to be digging deep into the formula for the normal distribution and learning how to integrate and stuff like that. No, it's just the literacy, the statistical literacy required. And give them an opportunity to ask the questions based on what they have faced, not necessarily solving the problem, but asking the right questions in the context of the statistics that will get their brains to start applying what they're learning. And because they're doing it together as a team, it will also lead to team building. It'll lead to helping each other. It'll lead to better outcomes for the department because we're like, hey, do you remember we learned about disease scores? Maybe we should try that. versus being like, I read an article this morning, which was on, and it was like, how can you improve problem solving using analytics tools? And I just went in and I know I'm probably going to get banned from LinkedIn one of these days. But I literally wrote something like, there is no tool in the world that can help you improve your problem solving skills. Like the only way to improve your problem solving skills is to think about them, identify the problem, blah, 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 all of that. But a tool is not going to fix it. You've got to
And
work at it.
actively do them.
Yeah. Now, a tool can help you make it more efficient. Like, okay, I know I need to do this and I need to run this data in this manner to create this kind of a graph. All right, you know what? You can get the code for it. Go to ChatGPT, like, help me draw an histogram. Oh, here you go, But it's not going to tell you that a histogram is actually what you need. I mean, if you go and say, help me figure out how I can problem solve, it'll give you 12 different options.
Right.
How do you know what to use?
You have to get very specific with it.
Yeah. And so like the analogy is like, you can't become a better furniture manufacturer just because you bought the latest saw to cut down a tree.
I love that. I love that. You can't become a better furniture manufacturer because you bought a better saw to cut down a tree. I love that. Can you give us some examples then of how using your data science skills has led to successes within companies? Can you share some success stories where your data science expertise led to a big breakthrough for your clients?
So I can't give the names of the clients, as you can imagine, but for a lot of my financial clients, they have to make reports or, to the agencies that monitor how they distribute their funding or how they give out loans, etc. And historically, that's always been like one of those bones of contention because they are not legally allowed to collect certain information about the clients when making a decision. And yet they have to report on how fairly they distributed those loans. And so one of the things that, as a data scientist, I do is I run the model the way the examiners want it to be run. And then I run the model the way it should be run. Because some of those techniques are like 30 years old and nobody has visited them because, it's bureaucracy. But the help there is that now they have an external auditor who looked at that information for them and is, as an expert, demonstrating why they are okay or that they are not doing anything that is deliberately or intentionally harmful in their communities. So that's a big one. Another one that I helped was to identify, some of the other things are like identifying whether they're advertising at the wrong time, wrong place, wrong platform. Are they pricing their products correctly? Because, there's always a fear, if I give the discount on my most popular item, maybe I'll sell more. And you're going, you would sell those items even if there was no discount on them. Those are your popular items. Give the discount on the things that you want to move. Still counts as a discount, but you're making more money.
Exactly, make more money. What are the other industries? Sorry, let me ask you in a different way. How have your data science skills applied across different industries like banking or healthcare or education?
I've done a lot of work in banking. I have done a lot of work in manufacturing and supply chain, with optimizing models and routes and inventory management. I have done a lot of work with pricing, real estate, manufacturers, because they all have, I'm fairly industry neutral. Oh, of course, education, like that.
Education, yeah.
I was there for a long time. And as a part of what I did as a professor, I also had like 25 different students who've done their PhD under my mentorship. Like, I was excited about that. But because they all did their dissertations on different issues, I've used a lot of healthcare data to help them with their models, employee engagement, employee compensation, marketing, building the company from scratch, a startup. So it's like all over the place. But there's everything in this. Cannot work without data. And so, yeah. And I have like books that I wrote based on all of my teaching years of experiences. So
tell us a little more about that.
Okay, so I have a book on Introduction to Business Statistics, which I think it's like 200 pages. But it has every kind of example that you can imagine in there on simple ways to understand math and stats, kind of what you were saying earlier. Like that's what I use when I create my Post-its. Like, how do I take a page and shrink it into a little Post-it?
Awesome.
So I have that, and then I have an Introduction to Management Science book, which talks about various business models and how a little bit advanced statistics, of course. So that would Introduction to Management Science, if a business leader wants to read it and doesn't actually work in data, that is just to understand what is possible. And then they should figure out who to hire to make it happen. I don't expect. Yeah, go ahead.
No, please finish. I may have cut you off.
No, that's
Yeah.
all I was saying. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
You had mentioned earlier when you were typing in a data scientist on GPT, only two women came up,
Mm.
right? How do you think um, we can support and celebrate women entrepreneurs, executives, educators in the realm of AI and data science?
Now, one of the things that I found, and I'm hoping I see more of it, I see a lot of people doing podcasts or
Mhm.
panels, especially on LinkedIn and in big business networks. And I am always astounded by how many of them don't realize that they are not including women
Hmm,
on their panels. Or if they are, then it becomes like the token female just because they wanted to check mark a box. So it could be like, oh, we have a panel of data folks in the AI world. Oh, and then we have this AI ethics female. Like they're perpetrating the myth that there's not enough women in data and AI, and that's just not true.
hmm,
I personally know so many amazing people in my space. I mean, of course, we totally geek out when we get to know each other,
sure.
but I think the way that I personally make it, my mission to support women is if I see somebody who's doing those things, I mean, I make an effort to reach out, I make an effort to spread the word, and work with them as much as possible because that also empowers me. So
Mhm.
this is not just one way; it's mutual. And I always appreciate when people in that field or people in other fields make a conscious effort to recognize, because it's going to sound like I'm picking on men, but women are not as good as marketing themselves.
Okay,
They are amazing at marketing other people,
but not themselves. Yeah.
not themselves. It's a social thing. It's long embedded in a lot of us. And breaking out of that is not easy.
hmm hmm That was actually a question I was going to ask you. Why do you think is it that these panels or talks or podcasts don't seem to be featuring more women? But the way, as you just put it, um, women tend to be, and again, I don't want to I don't want to stir any
No,
pots here,
no.
tend to be fantastic at marketing, just not themselves,
They
right?
they shy away
Hmm.
more than men. I'm not saying all men are amazing at marketing themselves. I
Right,
know enough shy men who will never say anything.
right,
But I'm simply saying that the probability of a female, the conditional
right,
probability of a female
right.
being less likely to market themselves is higher.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha. Thank you. Thank for clarifying that. You actually answered the question in my head as I was thinking it. Um, with all of that said,
mhm.
what future trends do you see in AI and data science now that again we're in this new technological revolution?
My hope is that because it is forcing people to become more data literate
Hmm.
and aware of the fact that the inputs are impacting outputs, that there'll be a more conscious movement that kind of goes away from collect everything that you can to collect what you need.
Nope. Thank you. I was hoping we'd get into that. Yeah. Okay.
And, so I like to remind people and myself too, just because something can be done doesn't mean it should be done. And it's true for data. It's true
Hmm.
for data collection. Um, you can build a model with bad data, but it shouldn't be.
But you probably shouldn't. Yeah.
Yes. Take time, take that additional time to fix your data before you build a model. And there's so many AI startups going out there right now. And I really, really want to say this because I think it's critical. The startups have an opportunity that nobody else has had before
Hmm.
and nobody else ever will. They have the ability to get their data models and their input training done right
Hmm.
before they launch.
Hmm.
I think it would be almost a moral obligation for them to make sure that they use the data correctly, they train their models correctly, they revisit and continue editing those models as their company grows, because they can truly impact the future, remove the disparities across the world in terms of incomes. I mean, there's so much potential. And the fact that they're starting on clean slates means they can do the right
They can
thing
do it all. I
without
100% agree with
bureaucracy.
you. And data is now available. It's more available than it's ever been.
Yes.
And some would argue this is the best time to be an entrepreneur than it's ever been, right?
Yes.
Or to have a startup than it's ever been. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your consulting firm, Analytics TX, right?
Mhm.
How are you preparing to adapt to these new trends?
Well, so as a data scientist, what we call AI now in terms of the Gen AI, that stuff is new. But the core adaptive AI and training models and all that is, like I said, decades old. So in a matter
more
of
than decades
speaking,
old.
yeah. So it's like I've been using that for my whole life, and I mean, not my whole life, but my whole career. And so it's a very easy transition. I actually had someone ask me, like, I thought you were an economist. When did this whole AI thing start? And I'm like, well, I've been doing it. It's a natural progression. And the reason is it's all about taking a step back. AI is not difficult. Yes, the coding is complex. And there are people who rock at the coding and the machine learning aspect of it. But the core principles, again, it's like go back to the basics. If you go back to the basics, you're going to get this right. And that's what me and my firm are trying to do. We work with other companies that think the same way and want to make a difference. Using the right tools in the right place at the right time for the right people to solve the right problem.
I think you just put it perfectly, where this is all math, right? So first of all, Gen AI is not all AI. And AI is data science. Data science is math. And these math concepts have been around for decades, maybe even centuries at this point.
Yes.
The only difference now is that we have machines fast enough that can just spit this stuff out much faster than we used to on pen and paper, right?
Yes.
I used to argue this all the time, especially in masters, when I got into the tech industry. It's this is math. This is nothing new, right? It's awesome, but it's not new.
No,
right?
No. I mean, I said to somebody that we used to do AI with calculators.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still AI. It's still artificial intelligence.
Still artificial
I'm not telling it what to answer, do the output. It's not like an abacus where I'm moving the leads. It's artificial.
I learned on abacus, by the way.
The key part of me is like, but yeah, it's just one of those things where, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but to this day, there's a reason why I have like my desk looks like a train wreck. But if I'm working on a model, I always hand do it first.
It's that mind, body, and connection, right? Of what am I actually doing here?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, this is why I believe education in less developed countries can be so effective. We didn't have calculators. We had abacuses, right? Because you physically got to see how those numbers moved.
Yes.
And I feel like that did a lot of good for us.
Yes.
And as you took that further down later on in my life, I could literally physically see in my head what those numbers are doing.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if that makes much sense.
No, that's how my brain looks 24/7. So yes, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Those things that they have in like all the sci-fi shows where they show like from the eye of Data, like the mechanical robot.
Just scrolling the Matrix or whatever.
Yeah, they're looking at things and they're like identifying the robot. Well, I think it comes from super geeks like us who actually have that, where they're looking at everything and can see those connections.
I 100% agree. And I feel like, again, using simple tools from a young age, like an abacus, allowed that,
The visualization just works.
It 100% works. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Well, as we wrap up, tell us, how can we get a hold of you? How can we know more about you? How can people talk to you? And how can people see the awesome work that you're doing?
So LinkedIn is my field of choice. I do have a website called Analytics, ANALYTICS, like for Texas.com. So analyticstx.com. But if you want to get a hold of me, and I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I think I post every day. There might be some days that I'm, MIA, but not usually. And I like interacting with people. I like talking about data, and I'm always happy to help. So
thank you so much for your time. You have a huge fan on this side of the aisle.
Thank you.
I love seeing your post-its on stats. I jumped for joy when I saw something on, I believe two of them actually. You had one on hypothesis testing, you had one on confidence intervals, and I think you had one on a bell curve as well. And I was going,
the normal distribution.
Thank you, finally somebody gets me.
Well, since we were talking about expectations versus reality, you might want to check out this week's post, because I literally just created like a P-Man character who talks about the probability and expectations and reality. So.
Awesome. So when I first saw your post, literally, this was such a breath of fresh air, right? Like, somebody gets me. Thank you. So awesome having you. I'm so glad we talked. Please keep in touch.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.